So good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to our 19th in our Shift, Sustain, and Succeed series. This is week 12 of helping you find answers to the most pressing questions our businesses have in navigating the COVID-19 situation. It seems as if everything's been canceled. Graduations, wine walks, sporting events, and festivals abruptly stopped in the spring. Many have been rescheduled for later this year, and others will completely just skip 2020 in hopes of returning next year. As one of the organizations who does have an intention of holding a highly modified event, that will be our Oil Heritage Festival next week, the Chamber plans to carefully, with some qualifiers, to proceed, including strong suggestions of masks, hand washing, and distancing. And at the extreme, the warning that the event will be canceled if circumstances change quickly. Our cases have been low here in Venango County, but things can change. Today, I've invited Michelle Crowley. Michelle is the president and CEO of the Carlisle Area Chamber to join me in discussing events and what we are learning about safety and compliance. In Michelle's region, there have been some very large events continuing to happen. So everything continues to evolve more now than ever. So remember that what we share today is based on the information that we have available today. We'll do our best to bring you current information as things change. And of course, as always, if you have any update or additional questions, please submit them to Zoom. We'll do our best to get to those before the end of this call. So, happy to open this up for some discussion. So Michelle, welcome.
Hi, Susan.
So Michelle, you are in a community, Carlisle, that plays host to some very large events, and not without some drama going into this year. So we're just curious if you can tell us about how your event has faced the challenges and decided what to cancel and what can continue to be held.
Oh, thanks, Susan. It is not a chamber event. It's a very large community event, and I'm guessing if there are any car enthusiasts on the line, they're probably familiar with, probably at a minimum, our Corvette show. On the other side, probably the spring car show that's held in Carlisle annually, and then fall Carlisle probably in the tertiary. But Carlisle has played host for several decades to very large car shows that draw international attention. They added an auction about 4 years ago, comparable to what you would see on the Speed Network, the Mecum auction. What happened, because the car shows it's an outdoor event, obviously, at our former county fairgrounds. What happened is, because there would be well over 250 people, right before our county was going to the green phase, they were faced with the possibility of not being able to host the shows. Spring Carlisle was scheduled for the very last weekend in April. It got pushed to the third weekend in June. And after a lot of work with the state to give them the green light to go, they never really quite got it. So they opened. State police showed up right in the middle of my executive committee meeting, which was going on. So I was getting phone calls from our state rep, and there were some that were saying violate the law. Some were saying don't violate the law. We were consistent saying follow the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health guidelines. So that's kind of where we were with our car shows for the spring. And Spring Carlisle started, we had the Chevy show 2 weekends ago, which is the smallest of the 11 shows that they do. And then the third show was the Chrysler show this past weekend, which is really, they probably had about 40 to 50% of their normal attendance, that being vendors and people coming to the show field, as well as people walking through.
So those are your big events. Do you have events that the chamber does that you've made decisions on continuing to hold or cancel?
Our Businesswomen's Forum is a 500 attendee, one-day large women's event that we hold every spring at Messiah College, which is located right in the heart of Cumberland County, not in my footprint, but we do this jointly with other chambers. It's great because it's the largest regional women's event, and because all the chambers work together. That doesn't always happen well in our area. So it's really nice that this is the event that we've been able to pull off. And so with that being said, we have made the decision we're going to push it into the fall and do it as a virtual event at this point, because really the event venues are saying you cannot do the events. We tried to push it into August, but then we got the final word from Messiah that we couldn't host it there. So we were pretty, I don't want to say limited, but we really had no other choice. And I think we've come up with a good alternative.
Right. Well, we may talk a little bit more about that. So what is the impact on your community of the cancellation of events that would normally be held?
Well, like with the car shows, we have a lot of hotels in our area. We do get some overflow from Hershey Park. We're about 30 some miles away from Hershey. So as you all know, if you've ever come to Hershey Park in the summertime, it's quite busy. So we get overflow from Hershey Park. We get travelers from Gettysburg. We have a college, a law school, the U.S. Army War College is in Carlisle. We have a ballet school that brings in international dancers every year. So we are really more transient than a lot of other communities in the state of Pennsylvania. Given our size, it seems more obvious than probably it does in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. But the impact, like this year, the ballet dancers did not come. That's, they're here now, and it's a 5-6 week program. In Carlisle, we affectionately call them the bunheads, because they roam around the streets in their black leotards and white tights, and the Washington Redskins, which has soon to be renamed football team, they used to practice in Dickinson College at the same time that the bunheads were in town, and you would see these very large football players next to these very tiny little dancers. So it's always kind of been an interesting, and plus we had the science camps at Dickinson. So the fact that we've lost all of that, it's really had a huge impact on our restaurants, retail, and hoteliers, especially our downtown hotel, because they've lost all the events that they've been holding there. And we're probably one of the biggest event hosts, and the fact that they've lost all that revenue, it's really had a significant impact on them.
Right now, would you anticipate that there's anyone that won't make it through this that might make a choice to close?
I'd say in the early phases, as we're all kind of, I think I read a number last night. There are 66,000 small businesses in the U.S. that are not going to, in the short term, that have not survived COVID. But Susan, you and I like, okay, once we weed through all of this and figure out what's what, was someone really struggling prior to COVID, and financially may not have been able to make it, and this was kind of like the last step. We've had a couple of businesses that have closed, but one was in the process of being sold. Both were restaurants, which honestly, one is really pretty tragic for our downtown because it has a huge impact. Another one is there's a rumor kind of going around. We have a country club in Carlisle, but it's smack dab on what we call our Miracle Mile, which is the stretch. If you've ever come down our way to go to Harrisburg, you've taken the turnpike to get here, and you get on Route 81 to that stretch between 81 and the turnpike. It's called the Miracle Mile. People think that's Carlisle. It's not the most attractive part of Carlisle, but our country club's located right along that area, and they've had an offer for a buyout. And because of the truck traffic that goes through there, they want to buy the land. So the owners of the country club, the members that are shareholders, really are trying to make that decision what they're going to do. And that's a big event location for us, and we'll lose another location. So to answer your question, yeah, that could be one of the first casualties. It's kind of not related to COVID, but I'm certain the losses they've had from COVID have a direct and indirect impact.
Yeah, I think we'll see that with a lot of businesses, that it may be just the indirect influence. So with the modifications you're seeing, thinking about that car show and how many people they're bringing in, what kind of modifications are you seeing that we need to be considering? What allowed them to continue to have those big crowds? Have they made modifications that they really didn't want to make in the first place, but they found they have to be allowed to be open? Can you talk a little bit about what's working?
We were working with the state pretty closely, trying to get Carlisle events to the table with DCED, because again, they attract with all their events over 100,000 people annually to our area. And really to work with the PA Department of Health, I think it was getting them to understand really what was happening with the car shows. And again, they're all outdoor events. This is not and it's an 82-acre facility. So really ensuring that they were going to follow the CDC and PA Department of Health guidelines. They gave out masks at the entry point. They had, as I think you said earlier, hand washing stations and multiple bathrooms. They had all those things anyway because of the mass number of people that are coming. I think they added a few stations to make it work. And I think they really had to get to the point where the state really understood where they were coming from. Their CFO, who runs Carlisle events on behalf of the two owners, he's on my board, he's my treasurer. And Harold's the one we were constantly calling our state delegation. We even pulled in help from our federal delegation. Just, it never hurts, right? Mm-hmm. So who you know is not who you know. I shouldn't say it that way. It's who you know that's going to make the connection. So things are done properly and correctly is what I really meant by that. To make that thought, because they really were not, I don't think they were really seeing that the necessarily precautions were going to be taking place. So yes, they did have a court date, and Carlisle Events did go to court with the PA Department of Health. Their judge was extremely fair, and they were able to work to a resolution without being fined. And it really came down to those bullet points. By having 82 acres and 250 people as the max, what they did is they really broke the fairgrounds down to allow for segments of 250 people with policing it. So they are really trying to modify and make sure that they don't have more than 250 people in each of those sections at a time. And I know they've really been working through that. And I think the first big test will come at the Corvette show at the end of August. But
okay, yeah, I was curious with the events that have been held already. One, are you seeing that the guests are willing to be compliant? Do the people attending understand that for those events to continue, they need to come and play by the rules, even if they don't agree with them?
Yeah, honestly, Susan, I would tell you that, there's some that would say that they're not. There's some that are saying that there are. But from my perspective, my being there, and then I have a team member that she's a big Chrysler fan, she and her husband, and she's got this really fun Jeep, and they go there and their friends come, and she was there all weekend. She had her mask on pretty much the entire time. And again, they were outside, and I think even the governor's guidelines are stating that as long as you're outside and not in a crowd where people are encroaching on, you do not have to wear a mask the entire time. So from what she was telling me, and people said when they go by the fairgrounds, they see people without them. But if there's not people crowding them, they don't have to wear them. So, and I think that's pretty clear in the health guidelines. So I think if people maintain their social distance, people accept the fact that you're wearing the mask to protect your mask to protect the other person. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of people really understand herd immunity and what the point is. We're really this thing's got to stop at some point. The federal government can't keep bailing us out, and the state can't keep bailing us out, because we're the ones that fund it, right? So I don't know. It's just really scary to me. The thing that's got me more scared, we're talking about outdoor events now. When we get to the fall and our restaurants can't have outdoor seating unless they can get ample tents and heating elements, they're the things that have me really concerned the most. And how our school's really going to make it work to come back, like our college. Right. They're really working to make it happen. And they do a lot of events in the community too, and they're all going to go to the wayside.
Oh yeah. So well, and you and I talked a little bit about, what are some of the modifications for holding these events. We're all exploring, can we move outside things or inside things out? Or is it possible to use more tents in the fall, heaters, things like that? Any other creative modifications that you've seen happening, or things that might be helpful to us next week as we go to festival? That, again, we're going to hand out masks, we'll have hand sanitizer, lots of signage for distancing. Anything that we haven't thought of that maybe we should put in our tool belt?
I would do this. I think I would draw a pretty clear assumption that you might end up getting more people than you think you're going to get. And the only reason I'm saying that, and it didn't happen with Carlisle events the first weekend, but I think it did happen this weekend with the Chrysler show. Biggest reason being, there was a lot of confusion when the police showed up at the first morning of the show. A lot of people didn't understand that they really were open, because the media only covered the fact that they had to go to court. They didn't necessarily cover the fact that until Friday afternoon later that the show was actually open and functioning. So pretty much any events that we've been involved with or been around, people are hungry to get out and people want to do things, albeit safely. Some people are still concerned about going out for obvious reasons, but a lot of people especially with the weather being nicer, they're anxious to get out. So I would think you might have a better turnout than you think. So be prepared for that. And one of the recommendations we got from some people, as we know, are not thrilled with the modifications. They're not happy that they're being asked to wear a mask. They are not happy that they are being restricted. And I would challenge that. Really, are any of us happy with that? We're not. And I think, de-escalation and kind of like trying to listen and really talk to people as they get upset and frustrated. It's, I hate to say it, we do it all the time at the chamber. If somebody's really frustrated with a problem, they call your office, they're mad at you because they're mad at the person they talked to beforehand. And I think probably everybody in your staff, everybody in our staff, and that's why anybody that's on this call, chambers in every community, they'll get calls. If you're reading the Chamber Professionals Facebook link, Susan, people calling about crazy stuff. We had one time where a person had a duck in their backyard, and it was Good Friday. We closed half day on Good Friday. And I, of course, was still there about to leave. And this person needed help trying to get this wounded duck out of their backyard. Well, a lot of us are animal lovers, and gosh darn it, it's Good Friday, man. I've got to do a good deed. So we found a home for that duck. We figured out what to do with it. And I'd say, but when people are really frustrated, you have to really calm yourself down and not let their anger get the best of you, and really slow your tone, listen to their concerns, and try to come to some resolution. Because I think the mask thing right now, it's a tough call, but man, some of the numbers, if we don't do something and trust someone, and people can be mad at me for saying it, but I just think, come on, don't we want this to end soon?
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's a great reminder, Michelle. We talk about that all the time. We do get those kind of crazy calls, and we get people that are upset, and it's not about us. And so we really, the chamber culture is listen, empathize,
Help.
let people talk it out. And most always, in fact, I'll never forget the call where someone said, well, it's no fun calling you because we just can't get you upset, because a clock in town didn't tell the right time. I think that's a great reminder as we go into this season and festivals and events. Is really, we talk about that a lot too here at the chamber. Ask questions. When furious, get curious. Like, tell me about what concerns.
Yeah, right,
so,
right.
Really good reminder as we face the community and talk about kindness and respect. Well, you mentioned about maybe expect more people than we think. We are fortunate with our event. I said this year we're fortunate that our event is really modestly attended typically in our community. It's not tens of thousands. So we're kind of glad of that as we go into this. But what are you seeing in general with events? Are people coming, or do you see a lot of people being apprehensive and staying back? Because we're seeing some of that, even in the restaurants.
Yeah, we had probably one of the more popular restaurants in our area got shut down the Friday before 4th of July because one of their employees had contracted COVID-19. And that was a big blow to the community because they have an incredibly beautiful outdoor seating in a pavilion. It's at a golf course, and beautifully, it was just about to have their grand reopening before they, be opening the bar and everything. And they had to shut down after being open for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I'm curious as to they open on Friday and their social media has changed a lot. I would assume that a lot of people were going there because it has an incredible sunset view. And I would assume that over the weekend, it slowed down considerably. The thing that I'm noticing too is most people in our community, we walk a lot. I live near a walking trail. Most people are being respectful, and even if they are outside, don't have a mask on, they do the social distance thing very, very easily, very quickly. We've had a couple of community gatherings relating to, the issue of integration or of social change and equity, and they've actually, I did participate in two. One had about 1,000 people attending. Pretty much everybody had masks on, save 3 people that I saw. They stayed in the very back of the group. They probably knew they probably didn't feel comfortable because everybody else did. So I think the silent peer pressure is something that's also I've seen happening in some of these events. And the other thing that will happen too with social media, people take pictures and it doesn't necessarily portray what's going on. And people will say first comment on social media is, oh, they're not following social distance guidelines. Yeah, they really were at that larger event that I was at, pretty much. And I was really surprised at how well it was handled without just people having to your point, what you were talking, using the term respect. It's just that. And I know it's difficult because it's not what we're used to. And I'm on the zoning hearing board for the municipality that I live in, which I know Susan's going, wait, is that a conflict of interest as a chamber president? I know, but it's so far it's not, and I would abstain. But last night we had our meeting and it was the first of 3 since this all happened. We've done face to face and we had the largest crowd and everyone came in wearing their masks. The first one, everybody took them off in the first 5 minutes, which made me feel very uncomfortable. Then the next one, we all wore them and people complained the whole time about it. And last night, only one person complained, and that was the court reporter. I thought, well, then you're not going to get paid if you don't follow the guys. We were indoors and we approved fairly for community projects, to residential, to commercial. And yeah.
Well, I didn't, in any of our questions, I don't even have the word masks and didn't specifically think about us talking about that. It's inevitable now when you're talking about events and gathering. And we've had a lot of conversations about what our role is as leaders. And I think you would probably agree that chambers, even though we don't have a direct relationship to the state and U.S. Chamber, we both participate in those organizations. And we have historically been organizations that are extremely conservative and more aligned with a Republican agenda. And we're seeing those organizations right from the top recommend following CDC guidelines. And so one of the challenges we're having is when we have leaders who are trying to protect civil liberties and our freedoms, feeling challenged on giving advice. And I guess my thought is, as leaders, we don't necessarily have to tell people what to do. We should show people what to do. So lead by example. So it sounds like what you're seeing is when more people simply make the choice to wear masks, other people follow by example. So you don't have to say, hey, why don't you wear a mask? If you get more people wearing them, more people will take that lead.
Yeah, and it's really beginning to happen. And I was at the very beginning of June, I was at a friend's beach house in Delaware, and Delaware had a different, the way they were phrasing mask, they were using the word mandatory. Mm-hmm. I know in the very beginning, Pennsylvania was struggling and actually saying, required, not required. We never quite, but Delaware was really interesting. My first convenience store in 3 months was in Delaware, and that I went into, and very clearly, one person walked in without a mask and they were told to leave. And with events, that's not easily done, especially if people are paying to attend. And I empathize with you because, boy, they give us all a pit in our stomach when something happens. And as you said, you're strongly recommending, but I think it just as human beings, and I'm going to go down this road and say it. Look, I get it from the civil liberty. I don't get the civil liberties thing. I'm not going to lie. I don't get it, because if I'm wearing it to keep you safe, Susan, that has nothing to do with, from my perspective, it has nothing to do with that. I've had a lot of people say that, so I don't want to offend anyone on your call. I think as leaders, that's where I think we're really conflicted. Both sides of the aisle are really conflicted in not providing some of that support we need. And that's where the chambers need to step up and help our communities. Because I will tell you, our borough and our other municipalities have been stellar. Our congressman has been great, his leadership team, and working through the funding sources. And everyone, I think, is, there have been a few exceptions to the rule, but I think everyone's worked really well. And our county funding program starts on Thursday. And our commissioners engaged the 4 chambers in our county to work with them. And I know that hasn't happened in every county. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Well, and that, as we talk back about events, it is critical to us if we're going to run safe events, perhaps not profitable this year, but at least come out without a loss. We have to have that support from leadership. So as we kind of wind down in our last 5 minutes, I'm curious to see if you think in Carlisle, we're going to see, and across the state, we're going to see more events being held with modifications, or if we're going to see people making the option to cancel. What's your perspective?
Well, it's really the caveat of, when you go indoors of like 250 people or less, I think we don't always get to that number.
You think that number will stick for a while, that'll be where we'll be?
Well, I would have told you 2 weeks ago, yeah, I think it will. Right now, with where things are going, I don't know. And that's what's got me, Susan, I'm probably like you. I look at we have over 700 members, and I look at them as our kids, and keeping them all safe, and whether they're the largest, like Giant has their corporate office here, they're a member, but I still look at, like, it's really important to work with them and their team as well as all of our sole proprietors. And yeah, so I honestly think if we keep moving ahead and our numbers don't get worse here, yeah, I think we will see that happen, because we have to figure out how to deal with the fact we're not going to be able to be outside.
How to reopen. Well, I'm really excited to hear more about your virtual event and how that's planned. Are you taking your lead from other virtual events you've seen happen? Do you think we're going to see more, large events happen virtually like that?
Probably a lot of you are familiar with the PA Conference for Women. It's a one-day conference. Typically, it was always held in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but most recently it's in Philly. But
I've always wanted to go. I've never gone to it, but I've always wanted to.
They get between 5,000 and 10,000 women, depending upon who the speakers are, and it's huge. And I haven't gone when it's been that large, but they have sessions and vendors, and then they have keynotes. Our event has been around longer than theirs has been. We're, I think, our 27th, 28th year, and we made it regional the year I started. That was one of my tasks when I started. And we're limited by our venue, but we tried the farm show for a little while and got up to 1,000 people. Then 2008 hit, and we scaled back because we wanted to maintain it. And that was a good lesson to learn too. How do you do something when you can't get to the same, kind of like what you're doing in the next, to keep something instead of losing it altogether, how to modify it to keep it around. And that's something. So Business Women's Forum, we're making it, if you buy your ticket, instead of coming one entire day where you're in, and you're not going to get your meals, obviously, we're going to do our keynote and our award program as the primary event. The breakout sessions, because we have 3 different breakout sessions with 3 different speakers at each time, so 9 sessions altogether. We're going to do 3 different dates that people will be able to call in. So we're going to spread it out over a period of weeks. So people will have to they'll get the entire ticket, because to sit through something for 6 hours is not going to be easily when you're in an event, you see your friends, you go to the vendor area, you get up and walk around, and it's not easily done, and much more tiring on the attendee too. So I think, being out of respect, we're going to try that, different than what the state programs do. We kind of looked at their model. That way we're not changing our ticket price necessarily. We're modifying it somewhat because there are no meals. They did not modify theirs. They kept that at the same price because of the fees that they pay for their speakers.
Yeah, if those
we don't pay $100. Yeah, we pay we usually around the neighborhood of $8,000 to $12,000 for our keynote, not $150 to $200 like their primary is. So
well, we'll keep an eye on you. I mean, I think some of the advantages, when everybody has the chance to kind of set the tone of new things. And, I maybe would never think about attending your women's conference, but why not this year, right?
That's the other thing that opens the door. You can invite more people.
Yeah. So I'll be excited to follow up with you. I haven't heard yet whether our PACP conference is going to happen live in Johnstown this year or not.
I think she was saying it, and that's my hometown. So, and I know the hotel really well. And I was Deborah before I left Johnstown to run the Carlisle Chamber, and she's like my sister. She's wonderful, and I think they're still hoping that it can happen, working with the hotel, because the number of attendees won't be close.
Spreading out. Well, we have a lot of attendees on today's call that host events. So as we wind down here to our last couple of minutes, any parting words of advice? And I'll remind everyone. I'm so concentrating on talking with Michelle that I didn't remind you that, of course, out on our website, maybe, Michelle, one of the things we can add in our resources is, as soon as you can, a link to your women's event, and
thank you,
where we might learn about that, and the events in Carlisle that we might want to keep an eye on or attend in the future. And I've got Michelle's contact information here as well. So if anyone has specific questions, I'm sure she's happy to have you reach out. But any last minute questions that anyone else wants to pop on the chat, feel free to. But kind of words of advice as we leave for today, Michelle?
Be creative. Be as creative as you can be. Listen to your members, as Susan was saying. You know, for years we've all said when you do a survey, like a post-event survey, if you can get a 20% turnout, that's our return. That's awesome. Not necessarily in events, but as we sent an event survey out asking what our members want to see, and we had about 45% return on it, which was mind-blowing to me. I really think people are missing the networking opportunities, and we've tried to do the online mixer. Doesn't quite work. UPMC has a big presence in our market. Their mixer is always one of the biggest ones we do. We usually get about 150 people there. That would traditionally be next Thursday. They're trying to do something a little different. Not quite sure what they're doing yet. I think it's changed, but we were thinking about having a goodie bag that they could pick up, stop and pick up, have our intern and staff members sit on the porch and greet people and give them a window and be there.
Well, that is one of our big modifications. Is our festival includes quite a few children's events that we don't feel we can safely convene hundreds of kids. So our nonprofit community, with the support of donations from the for-profit community, have goodie bags that will be available on our Children's Day for pickup at multiple locations. So they can pick up at either the summer playground program or at the library at different times, different locations. So we tried to be creative about those kind of things as well. So I think that's great advice. I know we have the benefit of a huge network of chamber professionals that we go out and look for inspiration, and we're willing to share. So some of you know that I've often been able to go to my chamber network and get ideas and advice and come back to you with with things you can do. So so here we go. We're gonna step in next week. Wish us luck, and Michelle, I hope that you stay safe there in Carlisle, and that we get the chance to see you soon. So again,
Susan,
everybody,
you are one of the best. I hope your members know that. I know they know it. So you're just one of the best in the country.
Well, I serve a wonderful, wonderful community and have a staff that is second to none. So I appreciate the comments, Michelle. The recording is there. If you know somebody that didn't have the chance to join us today, please encourage them to pop on the website. We're going to take a break for a couple of weeks, everyone. So our next 2 weeks, we will not have our Tuesday Shift Sustain Succeed. However, in partnership with the Northwest IRC, we are having the supply chain workshops. They're 2.5-hour workshops with David Carroll, Jess Carroll's husband. Those are going to be great events. It is a wonderful opportunity. So if you know someone, particularly in manufacturing, but honestly, if you're in a small business, you have a supply chain. So feel free to register on the NWIRC site, or you can get to it through our website. We'll resume our Shift, Sustain, Succeed series in August, with our first one on the 4th being Leadership Venango. We've got alumni from Leadership Venango that will be talking about the strengths of the program, what they learned, and why it was important to their journey in leadership. So we hope that you'll feel free to join us, but also encourage others that might be considering whether or not they would like to be part of our next Leadership Venango class. So have a great day, everyone. We'll